G'day, I'm DK.
And I'm Ardeet.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Two Ticks Town Talk, a segment from the Australia Talks podcast.
Yeah, this is one of our favourite parts of bringing the podcast to you, our listeners.
So please enjoy this segment from the regular podcast.
I've been everywhere, man. I've been everywhere, man. Across the desert, fair man. I've breathed the mountain air, man. I've travelled, I've had my share, man. I've been everywhere. I've been here.
This week we're heading down to Stanley in Tasmania. That's a small historic fishing town on the northwest coast of Tassie. Got a population of about 595, and it's about 130k west of Devonport. It's located at the base of what is known as the Nut, or in the local Aboriginal language, Munatrika, and that is a solidified core. You can see it, as always, there's there's links in the show notes, so you'll be able to see what we're talking about with the Nut. Basically looks like a great big huge rock just sticking up on the end, but it's a solidified core, a volcanic plug of an ancient volcano, which is somewhere to 25 to 70 million years old, and itself was formed about 8 to 12 million years ago. So they form when magma solidifies in the vent of a volcano. Then there's erosion, and the softer outside gets just gets removed, and it just leaves the harder, more resistant core standing proud. They're pretty common, the plugs, but the research on the Nut indicates that it was likely ponded lava that filled the crater or interior of a coastal cone, rather than simply a simple vertical feeder pipe. So not the most unusual thing, but it did have a bit of a twist there of note for it. That area was traditionally home to Aboriginal Tasmanian groups, particularly the Pirapa people of the Northwest Nation. A European settlement began in 1826 under the Van Diemen's Land Company. The site was originally called Circular Head, which was inspired by the Nut, and that was named by explorers George Bass and Matthew Flinders when they checked it out a few years early in 1798. Then it was later renamed Stanley after Lord Stanley, of course.
Of course.
Yeah, of course. I wasn't Stanley the cabin boy. I wasn't Stanley the ship cat. It was bloody Lord Stanley.
Of course.
They made a port there in 1827, built a school in 1841, and the town was officially established in 1842. So today it's still a working fishing port, but it's also a popular tourist destination. Got preserved colonial buildings, but the focus of today's 26 Town Talk is the Van Diemen's Land Company, and just its involvement with the area and early Tassie. So the Van Diemen's Land Company was central to the founding of Stanley, and it was one of the largest corporate landholders and investors in land at the time. It was formed in 1824 by London merchants who were after a reliable source of wool for British textile mills during the Industrial Revolution. And the Van Diemen's Land Company Act of 1825 received royal assent, meaning it was given a royal charter that was issued in November 1825. And a royal charter, it's a formal legal document that's issued by the monarch that incorporates a body as a single entity with specific rights, powers, and privileges, including perpetual succession. So for the Van Diemen's Land Company, the charter authorised the company to cultivate and improve wastelands. Interesting, they call it wastelands. Build infrastructure.
Yeah, that's all right.
That's well, you know,
that's really mean.
Yeah, well, that's how it was viewed. For Sizzle, it doesn't get better. unsurprisingly, build infrastructure such as roads and wharves, and operate with basically equivalent of corporate status as we know it nowadays, with limited liability all that time. But it was a way that they gave that thing equivalent to corporate status at a time when the modern company registration laws didn't exist. So it was just how they did it before the other stuff became a formal thing. So the company initially was after 500,000 acres, but got authorisation only for 250,000, which got later increased to 350,000 acres across multiple blocks. The chief agent that was appointed was a bloke called Edward Kerr, C-U-R-R. So they had a vanguard party arrived in Hobart in March 1826, and then settlers landed at Circular Head, as it was known then, in October 1826. They set up headquarters and brought in the surveyors to map out the grants and the major areas around there. Stanley, Woolnorth, Cape, otherwise known as Cape Grim, Surrey Hills and Emu Bay. Unsurprisingly, the Van Diemen Land Company's arrival led to direct and sustained conflict with the Pirappa people, whose traditional lands, what they considered wastelands, were taken for sheep farming. Edward Kerr, the one who was appointed as the chief agent, and not going to go down as my favourite person, he pursued an aggressive policy of land occupation. They carried out violent actions, including several massacres. The most documented one was one known as the Cape Grim Massacre on 10th of February 1828. So 4 Van Diemen's Land Company shepherds ambushed a group of Aboriginal people, primarily Pirappa men, who were gathering mutton birds at a beach near Cape Grim. It's now known as Tananaria or Suicide Bay. They killed approximately...
Oh, lovely name.
Yeah. Cape Grim, Suicide Bay. I don't know what Tananaria means in Pirappa, and whether it was named before or after that, but yeah. So approximately 30 men were killed. They threw some of the bodies from a 60-metre cliff. Now, they say that was in reprisal for early incidences where there was a shepherd who was speared and over the killing of 100 company sheep. But, well, I don't know that that's a justifiable reprisal. Well, it's not a justifiable reprisal at all. No. Whichever way you want to cut it, that massacre. Yeah, so look, that Cape Grim massacre, unfortunately, is aptly named, and we always hear about these things happening, but when it gets to that level, it's got its own sort of official name like that. We know it's gone pretty bloody shocking. So that reports of that event reached Governor George Arthur, but not until 2 years after. And that was just because there was a company employee who was disgruntled and blew the whistle. And there's a period, it was part of a spiralling of violence in a period from the 1820s to the 1832, known as the Black War. So like George Augustus Robinson later investigated, he recorded witness accounts confirming around 30 deaths. But basically, the big steam thing, the big behemoth rolled on. So by the mid-1830s, the local Aboriginal population in the northwest had effectively been removed to violence, displacement, disease, and forced relocation. So the colonial government provided the land grant framework and operated under broader policies, including martial law during the Black War period. But much of the actual direct violence on the company land was by the Van Diemen Land Company employees under Kerr's local authority. I suppose not being content with just massacring local people, they also had an impact on native wildlife through persecution and habitat change. From early 1830, the Van Diemen's Land Company introduced private bounties on the thylacine, or the Tasmanian tiger as it's called, because it was blamed for attacking sheep, which wasn't correct. It got a lot of blame for attacking sheep, but that was not the case. It wasn't that they wouldn't eat them or have some attacks, but it was completely blown out of proportion. So it was made more of an enemy or more of a pest, not pest because they were natural, but more of a threat to the sheep than what they actually were. So they put these bounties on, and these bounties continued for many years, and there was an early example of this systematic hunting of contributing to a species decline. The later Tasmanian government bounty from 1888 to 1909 paid £1 per adult and 10 shillings per pup, and they paid over 2,180 bounties, and they suggest that about 3,500 thylacines, Tasmanian tigers, were killed by humans between the 1830s and 1920s, and the last one died in captivity in 1936. And with that continual thing, it's the continual killing, the destroying of the habitat, and the inability of the thylacine to reproduce. Yeah, unfortunately, lost what I think is a really interesting looking animal. Yeah. Also, with the rapid extinction of the Tasmanian emu, which I didn't even know was a thing. Tasmanian emu, Dromaeus novi Hollandii diamensis. You're probably about to jump in with that. Now they weren't treated as a threat in the way the thylacine was. They're apparently abundant across Tasmania, including in the northwest area near Stanley. They were hunted by settlers for foods, who would often use dogs. Habitat was cleared for agricultural and sheep grazing, and that drove the subspecies to extinction in the wild around the mid-19th century. The last confirmed reports of seeing one was around 1865, and the last captive one was 1870. There were so many there that even one of the Van Diemen Land Company surveyors, Henry Hellier, named the Emu River after seeing so many emu tracks during the exploration.
They killed them all.
Yeah.
Well done, guys.
Yeah, exactly. So the company struggled with wool production, and they later switched to timber, and that turned out to be more profitable. They constructed roads, early sections of the Emu Bay Railway, and then over time, companies shifted towards dairy and other mixed farming. During 2015 to 2018, it was one of Australia's biggest dairy producers. It changed its name then to Van Dairy Limited. Then in 2016, it was sold to a Chinese firm called Moon Lake Investments for $280 million bucks. But then in February 24, there was a major milk supply contract they had with Fonterra, involving 25 million litres of milk annually. Fonterra cited unresolvable commercial factors, including a significant decline in milk volumes supplied by Van Dairy. So basically, that cutting of the contract accelerated a broader downsizing process that had already been begun after after the Moon Lake Investments had bought it. So they got rid of cows, sold off land, basically just started just ratcheting the thing down. Got rid of a big holding of hectares in the Woolnorth area. Took it right down to just a tiny amount. So it's still in business today, but that's just a small company. But it's one of the last continually operating companies, still operating under its original royal charter. So that still holds, which is sort of a matter of interest. And look, I thought there was a certain irony in the dramatic reduction of its size and numbers and the environment changing for it. I thought there was a nice juxtaposition given its, or an interesting juxtaposition given its history, where the environment changed, new things came about, and suddenly it's itself on the verge of extinction. So, it was a company I didn't know about. It was interesting seeing, tying that in with a lot of the decimation that happened in Tasmania. Now, this was part one. So, hopefully found that interesting on the Van Diemen's Land Company. Next fortnight, I'll be doing part two on this beautiful town in Tassie's northwest, and we'll explore another connection to the world from this week's Two Ticks Town Talk of Stanley in Tasmania.
Ah, that's so interesting. When you, I haven't been to Stanley, but I have been to Burnie, which is sort of not too far from there. So I sort of do know, roughly the area. And it's beautiful. It really is beautiful part of the country. That north coast of Tassie, I think, gets not as much love as I think it probably deserves. It is a really beautiful part of the country. But I couldn't help but think to myself, Stanley. Every town I know called Stanley is cold as hell. And so while you were talking, I looked it up. All of the places with the name Stanley. And of course, the big one, which a lot of listeners probably think of, is Stanley is the capital city and main port in the Falkland Islands, and quite infamous for the war that occurred there in the 80s. But of course, there are other Stanleys, and all of them are in cold places. There are a few in the UK and a few in the US as well. The one exception to the cold rule is Stanley in Hong Kong, which is a small coastal town and a popular tourist destination on the Stanley Peninsula in Hong Kong. But other than that, I think every Stanley is quite cold, which I think is quite funny that's immediately where my mind has gone. All Stanleys I know of are, in my mind, freezing. But of course, to the people there, probably not so cold. I think it's also
that's an interesting little factlet.
Yeah, a little, that's immediately where my mind went. But I love the idea of the nut, as you called it. I think it's really, really cool that they've sort of called it that, which is, I don't know, kind of funny. But we've talked about a couple of these sort of volcanic plugs through our Two Ticks Town Talks. There are a few around, and I think it's, unlike other parts of the world, I guess, we have a lot of dormant and extinct volcanoes, and as a result, we have these mountains that seem really out of place in the landscape. And so, of course, they sort of capture the imagination and the creativity of the people that live around them. And the nut just seems to be another one of those. So hopefully maybe there's some local myths or something that you might give us with relation to the nut in the future. Oftentimes I know local Aboriginal peoples kind of had some interesting tales about exactly what these the geography of this land is, though possibly not, because I know, well, as you said, the local Aboriginal people in this area unfortunately didn't have a very nice introduction to Europeans.
No.
And as a result, maybe a lot of their culture and language and stories have been lost. So,
I'll have a little bit of a look round for that. It seemed to be a couple of things about how it got its name, but yeah, look, I'll do that because we've quite commonly found that things like that stick out in the landscape. It's very common that the local Aboriginal mobs have got stories, legend, dreamtime associated with it. So whilst nothing stood out, I'll dig a bit further, and if I can find that, I'll add that into the bit that I was going to do. So okay, that's a good call. I'll take that on board, DK.
I also think it's so interesting the history of the company and look, not unique to Tasmania. We've seen this before where these companies around that sort of time period, I guess it's from like the 1600s to kind of the turn of the 1900s. We saw these companies just get empowered with what we today would think are insane amounts of power, and it was just the powers that be at the time, the people in charge were like, yeah, this company, literally a company, can have its own soldiers and take over an entire continent. Why not? You're just like, oh my gosh, how ridiculous. But by today's standards, obviously things have changed and we have much more accountability, which is great. But how wild that they had so much power as a company. It seems obscene, but I guess that's by today's standards, isn't it? So, how interesting! I'm looking forward to part 2.
Good.